So anyway, I am Christopher Martin, the director and producer of the piece, and to my right is Dr. Kawachi Clemens, who is one of the main people that I feature in the documentary, pretty much following him as well as myself and a couple of other academic scholars as they strongly believe that hip-hop can be used as a tool for several reasons in the higher learning community. So I'll let Dr. Clemens speak for himself in regards to who he is and what he does. So ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Kawachi Clemens.
All right. I do a lot of things. Primarily, right now I serve as the chair of the Department of Music at Florida A&M University. And I also I serve as the director of what in the documentary you all saw, it was I kept saying the Institute for Hip Hop and Music Industry Studies, but over I think about a year and a half ago, we actually changed the name of the institute to the Institute for Research in Music and Entertainment Industry Studies, primarily because one of the courses that I teach at the university is a course on African American music, and we thought it was fitting to expand the title. So I am Kawachi Clemens, and let's see, Chris and I, we've known each other for a number of years. As the documentary sort of chronicles, we actually met before the hip hop summit, and before we were doing hip hop, he did another documentary. He's very modest. A lot of people don't know he's actually an award-winning documentary producer. There was another film he did called Welcome to Durham, where he chronicled sort of the gang life and culture there and some of the programs and things and anti-gang movement that was going on in North Carolina. This was maybe about 10 years ago, somewhere around there. That was our first encounter, and then we came, I think, back around maybe a year or two later for the Hip Hop Summit, and out of that birthed this whole notion of, at our university, hip hop in education, and I think we've done considerably well in it. I guess time will tell. So enough about me. That's my introduction and sort of how we met. I guess at this point, if you don't have anything else to say, I guess we can start with maybe some comments or commentary on the film, or if y'all like us to keep talking, we can do that too.
Well, one of the things, I want everybody to get, and I believe that they do, who have seen the film, is very, very new. And I really prefer to call it a video journal, because when I first started it, the piece actually chronicles or represents 17 years. And when I first did it, or first started the work unintentionally, it was not meant to be in this piece. It was just something for me to just have for my kids and my grandkids, so if they ever ask, what did Grandpa Christopher do or whatever, that it would be there. I always think that when I hear about a lot of things that we as a culture, as a people, do, so much gets lost because we take life for granted. We think it's always going to be there. So I've always been big on pictures. Like I have literally gym bags of pictures of Kid and I's adventure from beginning to up until this point. But what I wanted to do with this piece was when it asks the question, can hip hop go to school? It doesn't mean hip hop in the literal sense. It means us, like I asked last night, how many people love hip hop? And everybody raised their hands. So it's really, can we go to school? Can the hip hop culture go to school? Because what a lot of people don't know is, if you know anything about the biblical story of the prodigal son, he left. Well, in this case, if hip hop was a person, it got ousted out of the school because of the financial crisis that took place in New York in the 70s, when they got rid of the arts programs and all of that. So hip hop was, if it was a person, was left out on his own. Let's fast forward, it's done extremely well. But now that the schools are in trouble, the school wants to come back bearing gifts, look what we've done economically, look what we've done with what we have as far as our global influence and stuff. Can we return back to school and not only learn what we need to learn, because some of us know if hip hop was a person, literally we have misused our money. So if we had the education we had from the school in accounting and how to take care of our money, we would do better, but it's not too late, thank God. So can we come back? Can we bring the influence? Can we be part of a recruitment tool? Can we come and bring many things so that both can flourish and thrive together really, really well? So that's one of the things that we really get into in this piece, is raising the question, and it's still not done. You know, the journal still continues. I'm really looking for people who are against it. You know, I didn't find too many, but I always like to have a balanced dispute, a balanced discussion, because those who doesn't believe in it, they raise good questions, good concerns, and I do have a couple in there, but I haven't met anybody who's brave enough to say what they feel about it on film or on camera, but I will.
Probably because they know they're on film.
Yeah, I just got to search YouTube a little bit more. But anyway, I'm pretty sure we can give you a whole lot more better stuff and inspire and excite, ignited by your questions. So we open up the floor. I get in trouble when I go too far with the planning and say, if you want to make God laugh, make plans. So I do what I'm able to do up to a certain point in hopes that when that's done, the next person comes along and takes it to the next thing. So my answer to that is we're more than open for that. It's just, it's all we can do to do what we're doing with the actual piece itself, which puts us before people who can do it. But at the same time, we are still trying to be very relevant in what we're doing that's actually in the piece. So, you know, he's being very modest. When I first met him, he was literally leading the band in North Carolina Central University. Now he's a big shot at FAMU, Florida A&M University. He's the director, as well as the music program and all of that. So with all of that being said, the answer is yes, we'd love to, but we'd like to, you know, find people who are good at doing that kind of stuff and making it happen, because that's, at this present time, that's not my forte, but I just, you know, we come with what we have and we, you know, set it free.
Yeah, and I think one of the challenges also is, I think we are part of the challenge. Mm-hmm. And I say that because I've been, so Florida A&M University, just a little bit about me, is actually the third university that I've been at. So the first school that I was at, and I'm not that old, I'm only 39 years old, but I got my first university job at 25, okay? So, when a lot of people look at me, they even still, I remember when I first got to Florida A&M University, I was in a room with colleagues and people who had been at the school, you know, 15, 20, 30 years, and they kept saying young man to me. It was like, young man, and I was wondering who they were talking about, but they were talking about me. And it was sort of like, I felt like this reverged ageism, because I had, in my opinion, I think so many ideas and so much knowledge, but you know, I was sort of still being approached as an individual who had just come to the university, right? So as if I was this non-seasoned person coming straight out of grad school who had no experience in higher education. And I was like, wait a minute. I was like, I've been in like higher ed since, you know, for almost, at that point it had been like 10 years, because I think so this is my 6th year at FAMU, so I got to FAMU when I was 33. And I'm like, well, I've been at a school who, you know, was also another research run, high doctoral granting research intensive university, which is FIU, that had like 40,000 students. So I'm like, okay, so I've been at like a very good school. I'm like, I got my PhD from UNC Chapel Hill, which is a pretty good school, right? But in this room, I'm still sort of like being treated as this novice who has to continue to legitimize what it is that I'm talking about in this discourse. So what I found is a lot of times the idea of doing and embarking on this journey, a lot of times we get stopped and stifled by our own group. You know what I mean? And because like my wife, she's not here this morning because the baby was still asleep, But she and I actually met as a part of like doing this work, right? And so we kind of linked together because she does her studies in women's studies and black feminist theory, and she links that to hip hop and how female MCs are like this third wave of like black feminist movement. You know, I don't really know all the details, so if there's anybody who studies their discourse, I'm not trying to trivialize it, I'm just, you know, this is how we met, right? And so we connected actually through hip hop and through our research. And so we were actually traveling all across the country, going to all of these different universities, talking about hip hop, talking about our own programs, right there in North Carolina, in Durham, like Duke University, like we were over there all the time, like doing these seminars and these things with the School of Education at Duke. And then, you know, my own people, I'm like, I'm here on the university campus, and I'm like going to people saying, hey, this is the idea I want to do. And everybody goes, oh, okay, well, all right, well, you know, we'll meet again to meet about what we're going to meet about, to have another meeting to discuss the possibility of meeting again for the possibility of actually doing something that we may want to do. You know what I mean? And so I found myself like going through this cycle of where I felt like I was just chasing my tail all the time. And you know, all these other schools, they were like really embracing it. You know, like you know, like Cornell has the Born in the Bronx, that whole pictorial collection. I mean, Harvard has a hip hop archive. You know, and it was crazy because it wasn't until all of these other schools really started embracing it and putting it out there, then it's like, oh, yes, this hip hop thing that you've been talking about for the last 20 years. We really seriously want to do this now, you know? And I was like, really? So we have those challenges, and even in terms of the school system, I sit on the board, and I'm an educational consultant to Vocabulary, which was also in the film. So Alex and Blake, who are very good friends of mine and good friends of Chris's, created this concept. So for those of y'all who didn't see the documentary last night, so Vocabulary is an SAT prep, basically. It's basically what it is. So the idea came about, there were these two guys that were working in a restaurant, Alex Rappaport and Blake Harrison. So Alex is a musician, and Blake was an English major in college. And so Blake was like, man, you know, he thought about how he learned SAT and going through the SAT book, right? And you have to learn all of these synonyms and you know, what relates to what, you know, given this and that, you have this other word in blank, right? So you have to sort of make these connections on the verbal part of the SAT. So he was like, there's got to be a better way to do SAT. And he thought about, you know, the old Schoolhouse Rock and how he learned, you know, conjunction, junction, and all of this stuff. So they came up with this idea. And of course, with Alex being a musician and a young producer at the time, they had both graduated from college, and they were working in a restaurant as like servers in California. So if I'm telling the story correct, as I remember. So they came up with this idea of basically making these rhymes, and as a student learns the rhyme, they learn it's the words, and they took 500 of the most common words that were used on the SAT. And they have the word, the definition of the word, and an application of the word in these rhymes. And each rhyme has 20 words. And there's probably 20 or 30 rhymes in each book. And so they took that and you know, got featured on ABC, got featured in Oprah, and all of these places, and they kind of blew up overnight. And then that is expanded to like US history. There's one on Shakespeare that we all collaborated on. We did many of the recordings in my studio in North Carolina. There's one on math, there's one in science. So, you know, we've taken this quite considerably now, and there's also been research done on this, right? And the research that's been done on it shows that it actually works. So I went to a dean at just in HBCU in the South, right? So I'm going to put my researcher hat on. In the Southeast United States, which could be anywhere, right? So, because I don't want to, you know, put the university or the anybody out there because I'm being filmed. So So I had a meeting with this dean, and I talked about this whole vocabulary concept. I had everything that that I had done in terms of hip hop research. I had copies of articles of like English teachers who had incorporated hip hop into their classrooms. I had some of my publications that we had done. I did a Freedom School, which was a collaboration with the Children's Defense Fund, and we did for 2 summers, where the kids had, you know, extraordinary amounts of gain in terms of, I mean, we had kids that went from not wanting to read to the point where they literally, like, if the day went where they didn't read, they were like, wait a minute, I didn't read today, right? And this was we did a focus group with the parents a year after we did the program for 2 years. Focus group was done by Paula Groves Price, who's a professor at the College of Education at Washington State University. And then we had like all of this data that showed, you know, the efficacy of the program. And I went to this dean and I said, okay, I'm here. I have access to these guys. We can get the books. You know, I just want to do this, right? And it's a school that also had a K-12 school attached to the College of Education, right? So I'm like, this is perfect, right? This university, we're supposed to be doing research. I've got this great thing. You know, the university has already said we have this issue with kids in English and language and, you know, here at our school. And the dean goes, well, yeah, I think that's all noble and all, but I don't want to be known as the dean, and I don't want our college to be known as the college that says that hip hop is the only way to reach black kids. And I said, well, I never said it was the only way. And I said, well, you're an educator like me. I've taught in the public school system. And I'm like, we do realize that there are multiple ways to reach kids. And if this is one that works, why shouldn't we, you know, do it? You know, so that was one of the you know, my encounters. And I encountered that a lot. So I think, you know, part of the challenge is people getting beyond the stigma of what they think hip hop is, which is also part of the reason for the documentary, because they go, oh, hip hop, that's you know, Lil Wayne and Jeezy and Waka Flocka, and they start calling it all these people. Like, yes, that's hip hop, but like, I'm hip hop too, right? And I got on the blazer today. Like, you know, Play has on a sweatsuit, but like, you know, hip hop is also Jay-Z, who, right, code switches, like he does that very well, right? Because he's hanging out and he's doing all his songs, but then he also chills with Warren Buffett. But like, Warren Buffett ain't chilling with Jay-Z if Jay-Z ain't coming correct, right? Because we know Warren Buffett, the billionaire, who has like more money than everybody, right? So, you know, so I think we have to really take all of this in context, and part of it is educating the masses in terms of what hip hop is, what hip hop was, and more importantly, what hip hop is to come. So,
one of the things I try and get people to understand, maybe in a more simplistic way, by using a metaphor of like, we're not trying to say hip hop. That's why I said at the very end in the graphics is that I'm not saying that hip hop is the solution. But if you were to look at it as though you are a carpenter, in your tool chest, there's a whole lot of different tools. There's a hammer, there's a screwdriver, there's all kinds of things. So please consider hip hop to be one of your tools in a tool chest to fix the problem or to be part of a solution. So like Dr. Clemens was saying, we know that that's not the only way, but it's a proven fact that in a lot of cases, it works, you know. So, and like another famous minister had once said, he admitted, I don't like hip hop. But as soon as he had a revelation, as soon as he was directed, divinely led to stop listening to it as a music of his preference, but to start listening to it as a language, that's when he understood it and accepted it in a whole different way. So, questions? Well, I mean, that's a deeper well that some people either don't want to really get into, and a lot really just don't know. I have a good friend by the name of Ron Lawrence. We're both into watching documentaries and creating them. And one we've been playing around with that we are going to do when our schedules and do permit is the connection between hip hop and your Cab Callaways, your Nicholas Brothers, all of that, because really, that's really the founding fathers. Those are the early days I strongly believe, without getting into it now, the reason why people, the media, or public at large chose to embrace the word hip-hop is because it was the closest thing to the word bebop. And there's a direct connection to that. Because when hip-hop, we'll do this class for free right now, a little brief thing, is that how the name came about was, it was in the 70s, it was never called hip-hop. It was just, where's the jam at, where's the party at, all of that. There's two individuals that we've studied it down to, Kool Keith Cowboy, who used to be with Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five and Love Bug Starsky. When rap wasn't as fluent as it is today, we would do a form of scatting. It would be hip hop to hip hop to the hip hop, you don't stop. Very similar to Cab Calloway, howdy howdy howdy, all of that. So someone in the media needed to call it something when it got to escalated to the point to become newsworthy. So what is this thing called? So someone grabbed that thing and said, okay, it's hip hop. It was very similar to bebop, old African American thing, so forth and so on. So it runs deep. It's deeper than '73 when it was, cataloged. I mean, to be birthed out of the Bronx is, and there's some question with that too as well. But I wouldn't necessarily say that it's as young or as most people say that it would. It's evolved into what we know today.
Yeah, and I think from a musical perspective, I liken hip hop to jazz because when jazz was coming on the scene, a lot of people didn't recognize it as a legitimate form of music, right? Largely because when we look at music in the United States of America, we're largely based on a European classical, right, ontology of music. So everything that we define as music, right, so sort of falls within the realms of these definitions of orally how we hear classical music, right, largely. That's what. And by classical, I know that there are periods of music. Classical is a period. You have Baroque and so many others. But largely today, when we think about classical, we think about everything from the concert hall, right? We sort of lump everything under that one umbrella of classical music. So there's a very good article written by Billy Taylor, who's a jazz musician and professor, piano player. It's called Jazz America's Classical Music. And in that article, one of the articles I use for my class, he basically takes those tenets of how we define classical music, and he argues that jazz is a music too. And so I look at hip hop in the same vein because hip hop, like jazz at its time, was an ever evolving thing. Right, and music is an ever-evolving thing. The blues tradition is still evolving as a people. As we evolve, and there's a really good book. David Elliott wrote a book called Music Matters, and it's a book really primarily for music educators, but he looks at musical knowing and understanding as an action, right? So he takes a praxeal philosophy to music education. Being music is something that we do and something that people do. So if it's something that we do, when we situate it, that means that as we're continually doing, the music is ever evolving. So, and then you take Samuel Floyd, who's the founder and former director of the Center for Black Music Research at Columbia College in Chicago. And he defines black music as music of any genre, essentially all over the world, created, performed by black people. So when a black musician plays, what's considered to be a classical piece that's written by a black composer, right, that is also black music. Like, we can't just say black music is only Motown, Miles Davis, Sarah Vaughan, right? So like we're beyond that. Like black music is all around the world. And I think what happens is people are so narrow-minded in what they define as music first and foremost, and then what we define as black music Because essentially what we've done is the same thing that the people who subscribe to the classical music autonomy, is that everything else, right, in the words of Lawrence Grossberg, falls beyond the margins, right? And so do we really want to be in that situation, right? Or how Stuart Hall talks about representation, right? So when we think about it from a cultural perspective, right, so how do we want to be represented as black people, right? So we already have this notion in our mind that, okay, this goes back to the writings of Du Bois and Carter G. Woodson, right? So in Miseducation of the Negro, where he talks about how, black people essentially have been taught to admire everybody but himself or their self, right? I think that's in How We Missed the Mark, or one of those chapters in the book, right? So, and that still is true today. And that book was published in 1933, 1936, or somewhere thereabout. So, but even from a standpoint of Stuart Hall, right? So how do we want to be represented? And for most people, right, we talk about the educated black, right? Specifically the black people that E. Franklin Frazier talks about in the Black Bourgeoisie, right? How essentially we created all of these systems, right? Jack and Jill, our fraternities and sororities. Why? Because we needed a system of belonging, right? And then it was also about separation, right? Because at one point in time, we all sort of came together. But then as we started getting a little more and more education, we wanted to sort of, as Ice Cube says, you don't want to, associate with the Negroes. In his, message to the Oreo cookie, take a mirror, look at the mirror, take a look, G. You don't like what you see, but you're quick to point the finger at me. You want to be a big fish, you little guppy. Black man can't be no yuppie. You sit in your suit and tie in your big clothes, but you don't associate with the Negroes. And so we have this sort of dichotomy that goes on where, educated black folk still kind of don't want to associate it with those other black folk, sort of the blue collar, the white collar dichotomy. And largely hip hop gets sort of put in that dichotomy of not being associated with educated black folk, right? Because jazz now is our black highbrow music, right? So, that's the music, when I go to the galas when I'm in Tallahassee and everybody has to wear their tuxedos and, the Lynx ball or the whoever's ball, right? And it's like, and what are we listening to? We're listening to jazz. But 100 years ago, we would have been listening to a string quartet because that was, the thing to do. That was the highbrow music, So, I mean, I think it's all about context, and I think if we put it in the right context, some of those people, they're never going to get it, right? But there are times that we're able to break through, because I had no idea that, as I was talking about this whole thing about hip hop, the people in the sciences at FAMU, they got it. One of my biggest champions of change is a person who's a full professor in the College of Pharmacy. When I first came, he was like, so what's up with this hip hop thing? And at the time he was actually the chair of the faculty senate, and he was on the board, a member of the board of trustees. And he was like, man, this hip hop thing, he's going on and on. And he was like, what is it with this? And I was like, So he had this perception of, okay, this guy's bringing this hip hop to the school. We don't really need this hip hop thing. Hip hop is just the beepity bop, right? That's what I always get. But then he asked the question, he said, so what's up with this hip hop thing? So which let me know that he was open to the possibilities, right? So we sat down, we're, sitting down at the bar, having vodka tonic or whatever, and we're talking, we're vibing. And then at the end of it, he was like, I'm with it, man, I'm with it. He's like, I think this is a great idea. And that would probably be, and because he was the chair of the faculty senate at the time, when he would go around, he was like, yeah, have you met Dr. Clemens? Tell him about this hip hop thing. And they go, wait a minute, you're a scientist. You do like real research. And you're like on the same page as this guy who does hip hop. And people couldn't see the correlation, but I'm like, but he opened his eyes and he asked the question. Too many times people go, oh, hip hop, hip hop. They don't ask the question, they don't say, well, can you explain it to me? And I think that's part of the thing that's missing.
It's interesting, at the top of that we were talking about change with jazz and hip hop. But one of the things I've been noticing that's been really interesting from a whole other area of music is what's happening with country music, how that's changing a lot. And you got these guys now that, you know, when Faith Hill and what's the other girl's name, America's favorite, the Kanye dissed at the awards? Taylor Swift, whatever. It's like there's a lash against their type of music with the rock and roll. And who's the one that won big now with the record they did with Nelly? You know, where he integrated rap, but they won like some top Oscar, or I mean not Oscar, Grammy award recently. So I know that there's a lot of things happening with that, where those people, like you was talking about with the jazz and the hip hop, now that's what's happening in country music now, not just with Nelly coming in, but just with a lot of the younger artists are coming with their own interpretation of what they feel country music should be. And there's a lot of change happening there now, where they're winning, because they're winning awards. It's like the younger people, new era of generation is speaking a lot.
Yeah, for the Chronicles, for the documentary, is there a length that you're shooting for? And how do you see it as?
No, I'm gonna have to do the Donahue thing here.
No, I'll speak up a tad bit.
No, I wanted to.
Oh, no.
It's theme music.
So for the Chronicles, for the documentary, is there a length that you're shooting for? Is there something, because I know this is we wanted to show that edited version that you did at the Schomburg and got the results from there. So is there a length that you're shooting for, and how is it that you want people to begin to see it and accept the packaging of it?
Well, I mean, right now the piece is at 146. I'm a big person that likes to make things short and sweet, but at the same time in it for it to be effective, so people want to know more, where they don't walk away like, all right, enough. So I'm trying to get it at like an hour 30. I like something I believe Malcolm X used to do when his person used to announce him to come on the thing. He would always say, keep it simple. He always wanted to be brief. So that's what I'm aiming for, is an hour 30, and really just get to the major points in it in a very effective way. I know the topic isn't a very big commercial piece. I'm working on another piece now called And I Dance, which is the story of hip hop backup dancers in the 80s and 90s that everybody knows their moves, knows their looks. I've got so many great people in the can as far as interviews, and I know that's going to be a big commercial piece because it's entertaining. But this right here, I felt that I owe it to many, being a person who got kicked out of 5 high schools, that there's a price to pay for that. And now your excuses are limited, because I would use the excuse there was nothing there for me on many others. But now hip hop, you know, a lot of people can gravitate to that. So hour 30, and to really just, like he was talking about with the gentleman who is the pharmacist, you know, turn a lot of people into believers and hopefully answer their questions when they come with that, tell me about this hip hop thing. We might not have the opportunity to reach everyone, but hopefully with this being viral or something someone can put in their hands, or don't feel that they can be able to articulate it well, it's like, here, check out this journal that so-and-so did, and hopefully that'll do that.
Yeah, and then we have so many, I'll take another question, I want to just interject. We have so many also like little anecdotes. Those of us who are professors, you know, at the end of the semester, they had where the students give the little comments and they sort of grade us on the bubbles and the Likert scale and all of that. But I had one of the students, I can't remember where her name is now, but she, in her, you know, on the back you have the option of, you know, writing comments, and then they give us the comments. So she like thanked us for the class, and she was like, she said she didn't have a really good relationship with her mother. And one time she was on the phone with her mother while she was in college, and she had some of the music from the class playing in the background. And her mother was like, what are you listening to? And she was like, I'm listening to such and such. She was like, what you know about that? You don't know nothing about that, right? And she was like, no, I'm taking this class with Dr. Clemens and Mr. Martin, Play from Kid and Play. And her mom was like, wait a minute, Play is teaching a class at FAMU? And then she was like, yeah. And she says they started talking about the music. And then she said from that, her and her mother rekindled their relationship based on like starting to have conversations about hip hop, right? Like, you know, I don't know what song it was, but it could have been, you know, Salt and Peppers, you know.
I think it was parents just don't understand by it.
Yeah, maybe. Right, but I think that's a very powerful narrative, you know, that you know, on so many levels, like this thing is making a connection and it's allowing that sort of cross-generational conversation to begin to happen. Because, you know, I recognize the fact that, you know, as much as I think I'm the cool professor and the cool dad, I have a son that's 13 years old and he really let me know that, like, no, you're my dad and you know you ain't that cool. And I'm like, well, everybody else thinks I'm like the coolest person. You know, even, you know, he thought at one time he thought I was really cool. So he came to me, he was like, Dad, and I said, what? He was like, so your friend Chris, that, you know, comes over to the house and, you know, y'all hang out? And I said, yeah, what about him? So he goes, is he famous? And I'm like, is he famous? He was like, yeah. And I said, well, why do you ask that? And he was like, well, I was watching TV last night. And I'm like, you were watching TV? Like, and I'm like, first of all, you know, past your bedtime? And so he goes, and I was watching this movie, and there's a guy in the movie that looks like your friend Chris, but I just want to make sure. And I was like, you know, who he's with? And so he goes on to tell me to describe the movie. And at this point, I know what he's talking about, right? And he's like, yeah, he's with this other guy. He's got like this big fade hair thing. And I'm like, what was the movie? And he was like, it was called House Party. And I'm like, what were you up doing watching House Party? So, and I said, yeah, that's my friend Chris. And he goes, wow. You know what I mean? But you just think about it, like, that's a true generational gap. Like, my son is 13 now. I think we had this conversation, he was probably 7 or 8 or 9 at the time, which is really why I'm like, what were you doing up watching House Party at, you know, 2 o'clock in the morning or whatever? But, you know, those are the conversations and things that need to happen, you know, so that we can sort of begin to bridge those gaps. Somebody else, question?
I think we put sometimes too much of an emphasis on the stereotypical image or sound of hip hop. It's really what's relatable. It's a language. It's a way that things can be communicated without even speaking to each other, just to see somebody on how they wear their hats. Yeah. It's interesting because in another documentary called Founding Fathers, one person talks about how in New York at a time, you could always tell what borough someone came from by what type of way they wore their hat, what particular shoes they had on, a particular style, but it was all hip hop. But that's really what it's all about, is to be able to find common ground with another individual with something. The thing I like that I didn't realize I was doing with this piece is that when at the end, which is I think the most important piece of everything that goes on, no matter the celebrities and the professionals who speak as far as the academic scholars, is that at the end I put in like the last 10 minutes, maybe a little bit more, of the students themselves speaking about, because sometimes you can do so much speaking about what they need, the student or whatever. No one's asked, like that old person in the room, like, you know, you think they can't talk, so the older, I mean, the parents or whatever is discussing, well, should we put them in an old folks home or this and that? And then finally the older person goes, I'm still alive, you know, someone asked me, you know, and that's how students can be at times. It's like, don't we get a say so? But the thing that was interesting in that piece is that if you notice in the lower thirds, it tells their name and their majors, hardly any of them are music majors. They all are majors in so many different ways. That means if you was to, I forgot what that plant is, when you blow on it and the seeds fly all over the thing. It's like with hip hop, it's like blowing on this thing, all these individuals, these students, these souls, and they go out into their different occupations, preferably to succeed. But like you said, one of them, well, that was a late bloomer, but he's a pharmaceutical person. But you have these others now that are going to be doctors, and lawyers, and, you know, this, that, and this, but they all have something in common. Somewhere in hip hop, it's relatable. Something is all agreed upon. And I think that's the reason why I have to struggle, going back to your question, a little bit on how it may have to be longer than what some people would like. Some people like shorts. Some people, they can't sit through, most documentaries are 2 hours long, if not longer. But I'm finding right now that every artist has something to say on the matter, and Will Smith might say the reason why he thinks it should be in there might not mean anything to some students or some teachers, but if so-and-so over here says it, to Jim Jones, and he's like one of the official thugs that are out there that represents in hip-hop, that when he says something, it's reachable to another demographic or another mindset in hip-hop. So I hope I've answered your thing, but it's about relatability. This is something that can be common ground for many. But it isn't, like we said, it isn't the answer for everybody, but the numbers show, the record sales show, the concert attendance hall show. Something's going right.
Yeah, and I think also, we talk about hip-hop, but hip-hop is, as he explained, can hip-hop go to school and what hip-hop represents. For me, it's also a means to an end, and as an educator, with everything that we do in terms of our educational programs really falls under culturally responsive teaching, right? So really, and this is Geneva Gay. So if you think about the cultural frames of reference, norms, and information in certain levels of wisdom that, kids in a K-12 situation or young adults in a collegiate situation, we all have a certain level of knowledge that we bring into the classroom, right? So it's really about taking that knowledge, the information, those values, those things that a person brings into a classroom, and use those as useful, points of departure for lessons or just ways to make connections. So for us, hip-hop becomes the culturally responsive approach to educating or reaching youth, right? And the reason why it works so broadly is because hip-hop has become broad, right? It's moved far beyond, the urban setting of the 1970s. It's, when you look at the demographic of people who buy hip-hop, like, it's not people who are black, right? Like, most of the people who purchase hip-hop are, young white kids in middle America who live in middle-class incomes. I mean, the research in terms of the Recording Industry Association of America has documented who the consumers are of hip-hop. So the interesting thing is, those kids in Iowa, those kids in San Francisco, those kids in Connecticut, those kids' parents are buying the vocabulary book, right? Those kids are using it. Like, vocabulary, their sales in the company is up and through the roof. And those kids are using it and it's working for them. So we're gonna come back and say, from this culture that we started and we created, that we don't want to use it. Now, mind you, vocabulary wasn't even created by, it was created by 2 white kids who were college students who are my friends, right? And I say that loosely, but with the understanding that we didn't create vocabulary. We created rap, and rap tradition goes all the way back to the African bardic tradition, right? So, but, so this was always something that we have done, but now, it's sort of, we're sort of at this crossroads. But, so just like in Asia, there may be another cultural music that would work in terms of using that to teach math or using that to teach science, right? So that we're just using this as a culturally responsive approach. And I recognize and understand that that's going to vary between people. It's even going to vary between people of the same ethnic group, right? Because you may aspire or ascribe to a different type of music, or you may have a different subculture within, sort of that culture. And hip hop may not work for you, because it doesn't work for all kids. We had, in our freedom school, we had a kid, Devon, who he never even listened to any rap music. And I think he sang, you remember that song that he sang? We had a show and tell thing in our end of the preview, and he was very reluctant to sing like a Maroon 5 song as a part of his presentation. And we were like, no, like this whole purpose of this summer program over these 6 weeks is for you to be who you are, right? And to express yourself in whatever manner you want to express yourself. And he got up on stage and he was singing the song, and everybody in the audience was like waving their hands and cheering him on. And at the end of the program, his grandmother was like, you all don't know what you, because he was being raised by his grandmother. She says, you all just don't know what you did for him. She was like, prior to doing this program this summer, she was like, he would never have gone on stage and did something like that. You know what I mean? And she was like, he's just a different person. She was like, he speaks more, he's more interactive with people. And it's like, he's just utilizing the technique of the MC, right? So those verbal and linguistic skills, right? So he just pulling those concepts of Gardner and he's applying them. That's it. He's navigating the spatial landscape, right, with his spatial intelligence. He's figuring out, okay, all right, you know, now I can talk with these people. All right, I'm on stage, I can do this, and you know, to interact with this group of people over here. He's gonna walk over here to this group of people, and they start cheering him on a little more. I mean, it's the same exact thing, and that's really what we're trying to do. You know, if we can just break through and you know, make some change, and you know, we're not going to probably change the world with this, but you know, this is something that you know we're very, very passionate about. It works for us. We have a pretty good time doing it, and you know, we just want to see where it goes from there.
Again, it's a tool. You know, I can see this particular piece along with others that we want to join with. That someone might not like hip hop, but they want a relationship with somebody that they see does like hip hop. What can I do to not, what can I do, what kind of research, what can I learn that I can be knowledgeable of how to approach this person or to be able to become friends with them or get something done without them going to a particular piece that may be just crazy violent and just whatever. They can get this particular documentary and be informed and educated and like, wow, okay, this is how I can approach, or this is how I can make that happen. So again, it seems to be the word that's key here. It's a tool.
And talk about the conversation you were having with Ralph Tresvant. You talking about hip hop?
Yeah, Ralph Tresvant from the group New Edition. We get into a lot of deep philosophical conversations, and you know, we was in one of those Black Panther moods where he was talking about how he embraces, when someone taught him that what hip hop meant was, he said back in the 70s and 60s, when you used to come up to somebody and say, yo, are you hip to this? That meant, did you know about this? Do you know what's going on? Where this club is at? Or did you know this? Are you hip to it? And hip meaning knowledgeable. Hop is a word of action. It's to put it into action. So what hip hop to him meant, which I agreed, because like why I never looked at it like that, is hip is to know, hop is to take that knowledge and put it into action. Hip hop. So that was just really deep. And then after that, we took off our black berets.